Hi everybody. Today's video is going to focus on the first of three videos going over the production possibilities frontier or the production possibilities curve. Today we're going to focus on introducing the model of the PPF, which is the very first model the kids see in all of macroeconomics. So making sure that they have a firm grasp of how these models work is going to be really important to your future success, especially moving into aggregate supply and aggregate demand later on in the course. What I want to do today is to kind of frame the lesson by answering three essential questions. So when we're talking about the production possibilities frontier, for the intro lesson, we're going to try and figure out question number one, what is the production possibility frontier? So we're going to go ahead and define it. Question two, why do we need the production possibility frontier? Like, why is this a functional graph and why is it something that they'll need to know? And question number three, how does the production possibility frontier as a model work? We're not going to get into using the production possibility frontier for calculating opportunity cost yet. That'll happen in our next video. But for today, we're going to introduce the concept of a production possibilities frontier and teach the kids a little bit about how it works. Okay, so question number one is, what is the production possibilities frontier? Long story short, the production possibility frontier is basically a visual way for us to represent the trade-offs that are made in a simplified economy. So we learned in the last lesson that we live in a world of scarcity, and because of scarcity, we can't have everything that we want. But in order to make the choices as to what we do and don't want, we need to understand what the costs and benefits are of each of those choices. So for example, if I wanted to go to lunch, I need to understand the costs and benefits of a McDouble relative to a bacon cheeseburger from Wendy's relative to tacos from Jack in the Box. So in order to make the correct choice, I need to be able to quantify the cost and benefit of each of those choices. And the production possibility frontier is a relatively easy visual way to actually look at the choice and see what the cost is going to be. So we use it as kind of a simplification of something that I think most of us do in our head all the time without actually sitting down and thinking about it, which is to weigh the relative costs and benefits of certain actions and decide which of those actions gives us the greatest benefit. Question number two for the production possibilities frontier is, why do we need the PPF? Like, what's even the point of having this particular graph? And to answer that question, we have two different reasons why the production possibility frontier is more useful to us than just kind of doing the quick math in our heads and making a gut decision. Reason number one is because we need to know what the opportunity cost of a choice or an action is in order to make the most beneficial choices. So we know that people are essentially rational and we want to do what's in our own best interest, but we don't always know through gut instinct what is actually in our best interest. And so the production possibility frontier allows us to quantify opportunity costs to make sure that the choices we're making are actually the most beneficial choices in a way that's a little bit more precise and a little bit more scientific than just going with my gut, I feel like this particular choice is the right one. So we want to be able to quantify that to make sure that we are maximizing the utility we can extract from each and every choice in order to make sure that everybody has the highest quality of life possible. The second reason why the PPF is going to be more useful than just kind of gut instinct is because, as we've already learned, resources, especially productive resources, should be used efficiently to satisfy society's goals, meaning that we want to extract as much utility as possible from each of the scarce resources we use. We don't want to be wasting resources. One thing that the production possibility frontier does that we can't necessarily do in our head is get a visual representation of the point of productive efficiency. And the point of productive efficiency is when you are producing as much, given your limited resources, as you can possibly produce, which is step one in making sure that we maximize utility and make sure that we get the most benefit for the most people out of the limited resources that we have. So any point that's found on the production possibilities frontier is going to be a productively efficient point, therefore guaranteeing we're not using our resources inefficiently and guaranteeing we're not wasting the potential to provide more people with a higher level of utility. So the final question that I want to address with this lesson is, how does the production possibilities frontier work? And there's essentially two different things we need to talk about with regard to this. One of which is the curve of the production possibilities frontier itself, and the second is how different points correlate with the curve to give you different pieces of information about how this economy is operating. So I'll go ahead and talk about the curve of the production possibilities frontier. The production possibilities frontier is always downward sloping, and it is a downward sloping with an inconsistent curve. And the reason why it's shaped like this is because of the law of increasing opportunity costs, which basically tells us as more units of a product are produced, the per unit cost goes up. Keeping in mind this is opportunity cost, not price. Kids will like to point out economies of scale here, and good for them, but we're talking about cost here and not the price on the shelf. Why does the per unit cost go up as more of a product is produced? The answer has to tie back to last lesson and the lesson on scarcity. To explain this particular phenomenon to the kids, I usually like to draw a picture. You'll have to forgive my questionable artwork here. But I imagine a scenario where there's a guy in the woods and he's looking to build a log cabin. And the resource he's using is the trees that are around him. The very first tree he cuts down, I always ask the kids, which tree is he going to cut down first to build his cabin? And they're always like, oh, whatever the closest one is. And I hypothesize a scenario where after he's cut down the closest trees, which trees does he have to cut down next? And they're like, oh, the ones that are slightly farther away. And that's essentially the law of increasing opportunity cost right there. The first batch of trees is going to be the easiest and most readily available resource that can be used for that production. But once that resource is exhausted, because we live in a world of scarcity, he has to walk farther or he has to use trees that are less well suited for his production. So this is essentially an explanation as to why the production possibility frontier is downward sloping. It's because we're going to use up all of the best and all of the most convenient resources first, but because we live in a world of scarcity, if we want to continue producing additional units, we're eventually going to get to a point where we need to use worse resources or farther away resources or resources that are more expensive to extract. The final part of the lesson that I want to talk about is going to focus on how various positions in relation to the production possibility frontier give us information about exactly where production for this economy is going to go. So as you've seen, I'm using the book's example of labeling these things point A, point B, point C, and point D. The important concept for the kids to know here is that any point on the production possibility frontier, regardless of where it is, has achieved productive efficiency. And I know we have productive efficiency because I can't produce anything more with the resources that I'm given. They also need to identify that point C, or in fact any point to the left of the production possibility frontier that's sort of shaded gray here, represents inefficient levels of production. You can achieve that level of production, but it involves not utilizing some of your productive resources. So in the example of Tom and Hank that we have in the textbook, I tell them that Tom can produce fewer fish and coconuts than point A or B, but he's basically leaving money on the table, right? He could be producing more, and he's not. So he's kind of slacking off in this scenario. So we can certainly produce it at any of the points to the left of the production possibility frontier, but if we're looking to maximize efficiency and maximize utility in our economy, this certainly isn't what we want to be doing. If you feel like it, you could also relate this to like the unemployment rate of the economy. If we've got a bunch of people who are unemployed that would like to be working, but instead they're chilling out eating Cheetos at home or looking for a job that they can't find, we are not efficiently utilizing all of our productive resources, and our economy will be somewhere to the left of full efficiency. The last point that we put out there is point D, which is a point to the right of the production possibility frontier. The kids need to know that given current resources and technology, it's impossible to produce at point D. We simply don't have the resources or the time or the tech to get our production out to that point at this junction. However, as we'll learn a little bit later on, and certainly as we learn when we get to relating this to the long-run aggregate supply curve, we know that we can actually get out there, but it involves changes in resources, either the quality or quantity of those resources, or changes in technology and productive efficiency. But for right now, we're just going to say that that point D out there represents an impossible level of production, but I always stipulate it's impossible given current levels of resources and current levels of technology. It's not a permanent situation. So hopefully this has been a useful introduction into the production possibility frontier. Where I'm at right now essentially takes us up through roughly page 18 in the Krugman textbook, or at least in the version of the textbook I'm using, which is about a quarter of the way through Module 3. I'm going to have 2 more lessons going up with the production possibility frontier. I'll put one up on calculating opportunity cost either today or tomorrow, and then hopefully tomorrow we'll get to one about investment and long-run growth and actually shifting the production possibilities frontier. If you have any other questions, feel free to shoot me an email. But until next time, thank you for watching.